Part 53. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 523. As soon as Taifu Yan handed over the papers, there was an uproar. At this time, negotiating peace with the kingdom of Jin and Xixia was no different from betraying the country for survival. Half of the officials in the court strongly opposed it, and the remaining half were half silent and half approving. The Yan family was dragged into the vortex, and the whole day's court meeting was almost full of officials scolding Mrs. Yan, but unfortunately, none of the Yan family went to court today, and this was the reason why everyone was even more angry. Taifu Yan has not been in court for a long time, but Yan Du is a second-rank official. This person is also absent, obviously to shirk responsibility, so as soon as the court meeting is over, some officials are annoyed to go to Yan's house to smash the door. The Great Zhou dynasty was a strange country. Those in power were afraid of the people's rebellion, but they were not afraid of their speech. Therefore, the people could even smash rotten eggs at the gate of the palace without any crime, as long as they did not use iron tools to demonstrate at the gate of the palace. Officials can shout that the emperor is a fool, or fight in groups in front of the emperor. It is not new to run to the minister's house and smash the door because of anger. Back then, Prime Minister Qin tried his best to promote the peace talks between the Great Zhou and the Kingdom of Jin. After the land was given away and the New Year coins were given away, many officials threw rotten eggs into it. There is no way. So angry officials rushed to the gate of Yan's house. The gate of the Yan family was closed tightly, and a censor was the first to smash the door, howling angrily, because the Yan family was a family of scholars and rights, and Taifu Yan and Yan Du had always supported General Yuan and other generals in their claim to recover the country. The leaders of the Qingliu, everyone was even more unacceptable to Yan Taifu's rebellion, so they were very excited. Some officials even fell to the ground in the street, crying, "Teacher, you ruin my great week." The censor knocked on the door and cried, "Teacher, please give us an explanation, why did you betray the country and ask for peace? Half of my country was stolen by the kingdom of Jin, and now the southwest area has also fallen into the hands of Xixia. Do you want to ignore those people? Come out and give us an explanation." The common people didn't know exactly what happened, but it didn't prevent them from watching the excitement. It was the first time they saw so many officials crying in the street, and they all stood aside curiously. A carriage stopped by an alley, and a stalwart man stopped beside the car, and said respectfully, "My lord, the imperial doctor sent by the emperor has not come out, and none of the servants of the Yan family have come out since yesterday, extremely strange." Qin Xiang slightly opened the curtain, looked at the officials crying on the ground, his expression was condensed, and he snorted coldly, "Idiot." He looked up at the Yan mansion, and said, "I'm afraid that the letter written by the teacher was ordered by the emperor, however, this is exactly what I want, and it saves me a lot of effort." Just as Qin Xiang was about to put down the curtain to let people leave, the door of the Yan mansion slowly opened. He looked up, his eyes were all white, his face was stunned, and then his complexion changed drastically, and he leaned out of composure, "Teacher." Everyone in Yan's family stood inside the door in mourning clothes, and the officials outside the door were still in tears, which immediately frightened the people inside. Yan Du's eyes were red as he watched his colleagues who were kneeling, sitting, standing, angry, sad, or annoyed at the bottom of the steps slowly kneel down. Yan Fu and the descendants of the Yan family behind him also knelt down and kowtowed to the people outside the door. Head. Yan Du choked up and said, "Father, my father passed away last night." There was silence inside and outside the door. Yan Du's throat was dry and tears flowed. He said, "Father said that negotiating peace with Jin Kingdom Xixia is an act of disloyalty, filial piety, benevolence, and unrighteousness. I am sorry to the ancestors of the emperor, and I am sorry to the common people of Li, it pushed the Yan family into an unrighteous place. However, Dezhou is now full of wars, but only by ensuring the stability of the border can the universe be stabilized. My Dezhou will not perish. I hope that my colleagues will be merciful and tolerant. After all, he kowtowed his head again. An official kneeling on the ground murmured, after the peace talks, can I really keep Dezhou? The voice was not loud, but everyone heard it in the silence. Everyone was suspicious in their hearts, and they stared blankly at each other, with everyone in the Yan family, feeling at a loss for the future. The demonstration at Yan's house ended in this way, but instead of feeling relieved after venting, the officials who left felt even heavier, as if a stone was blocked in their hearts. And the Yan family also hung up the white flags and formally organized the funeral of Taifu Yan. Not many people came to the funeral, only a few relatives and a few students of Taifu Yan came, and Prime Minister Qin also came in person. He respectfully kowtowed 3 times in front of Taifu Yan's spirit, and did not talk to Yan Du and others. Talk more and leave. Even with Yan Du's explanation, most people still couldn't understand Taifu Yan's note, but the emperor was already preparing to follow the content of Taifu Yan's note. The officials of the half-court opposed it, but Qin Xiang stood up to support it, and mobilized all the forces he could to promote this matter. The emperor didn't care about Prime Minister Qin at this time, because Xixia's pace was getting faster and faster. Although the rebels were now blocked by Qi Heiran from the Longxing mansion, there were also small bandits rebelling in other places in the south of the Yangtze River. The emperor had no time to delay up. After the emperor finally managed to negotiate a peace plan, Taifu Yan was about to go to the funeral. Mu Yangling sighed, and proposed to the queen that he wanted to go out of the palace to pay homage to Taifu Yan. This surprised the queen, but she couldn't make up her own mind and asked the emperor. The emperor was only silent for a moment before nodding in agreement. Li Jinghua didn't go, she stayed to look after the children. She didn't have as complicated feelings for Mrs. Yan as Mu Yangling. In her opinion, it was just a change in the world, and she only saw Mrs. Yan from a distance. On the one hand, the impression was not deep, she could not understand Mu Yangling's feelings of crying for him. Mu Yangling did not agree with Taifu Yan's views and actions, but admired him for being able to resist this infamy, and admired him for being able to take on this responsibility. On this point, he was much more responsible than Emperor Jinjian. This alone deserves Mu Yangling's admiration. If adding the characteristics of this era, Taifu Yan is even more worthy of her admiration. She is a latecomer. In her opinion, anyone can be an emperor. As long as she has the ability and virtue, she can accept another emperor every day. But people in this era are not good. In the eyes of Taifu Yan, he is a member of the great Zhou dynasty. Only the Guo family is orthodox, so he wants to protect his own country. But in the eyes of Mu Yangling, the people of this world are the people. A country is divided by region and race, not by dynasties, so in her opinion, it is wrong to cede a large area of territory and reduce so many people to second-class citizens in order to preserve a large Zhou dynasty. It's just a mistake in the understanding of the times, and she can't use her knowledge of the last 600 years to correct his thinking. Mu Yangling put on plain clothes and went to worship Taifu Yan with the funeral. The Yan family was slightly surprised, because most of the people who came today were people close to the Yan family, or students who still recognized Taifu Yan as a teacher. Even Prime Minister Qin avoided suspicion and did not come, just offering sacrifices on the side of the road. However, the Qi family and the Yan family don't seem to have a particularly deep friendship. Yesterday, Qi Ziyuan's urgent document arrived before the emperor's case. He objected to the peace negotiation with Jin Kingdom Xixia. Qi Heiran's paper also arrived 2 days earlier. He also opposed the peace negotiation. Ordinarily, the Qi family should be at odds with the Lord's peaceful Taifu Yan. Mu Yangling offered incense to Taifu Yan respectfully. Seeing that Yan's family looked at her with doubts, Mu Yangling said in a low voice, "Uncle and Xianggong don't agree with Taifu Yan's point of view, but admire Taifu Yan's character. They will object it is his right to write the papers he submitted, but it will not prevent him from submitting the papers, so those officials clamoring for the Yan family to take back the papers are ridiculous. Yan Fu was startled, and looked at Mu Yangling with wide eyes in surprise. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 524. It is undeniable that Yan Du and Yan Fu's hearts were warm at this time. Qi Ziyuan and Qi Heiran were full of good feelings. Although the attacks on Yan's family by officials and common people decreased a lot because of his father's death, they were also ignored. Most of the friends and relatives who had made good friends in the past broke up, and they didn't even participate in the memorial ceremony for their father. It is impossible to say that they are not chilling. Now that the Qi family, who had always come and gone less often, came to pay homage, it was naturally much more precious. The Yan family sincerely thanked Mu Yangling slightly, and Yan Fu said, "Men Qi Gong, thank you for Yan and General Qi." Mu Yangling nodded slightly, and walked out of Yan's house. She turned her head to look at the Yan's house, which was wrapped in plain clothes, and thought, how long can Dezhou last without such a pillar? Will the powerful Zixia agree to negotiate a peace? Mu Yangling, who came out of Yan's house, could not stay outside for a long time. Almost as soon as he went out, he was invited by the accompanying maid to get into the carriage and return to the palace. But Fan Zijian had already got the news. He was silent for a moment, and said, "Ask someone to set up a road sacrifice on the way to the funeral, and hang the label of the Fan family." Yan Mo was stunned, and said, "I'm afraid the master will be angry if he finds out." Fan Zijian sneered, "Then change it to my name. Go ahead, hurry up, and make sure it's done before the funeral. Research Inc. should be next." The street was a little quiet, and there were only 6 families who set up road sacrifices along the whole street, including the white flag sacrificial shed of Qin Xiang's family standing far away. Sacrifice. Taifu Yan has been a legend all his life. The Yan family is a family of poetry, books, and rites, so he studied early and was very talented. Ranked at the 2nd rank, the speed of promotion was the highest before General Yuan and Qi Ziyuan came out. What's more, he is a civil servant, and civil servants are notoriously slow to get promoted. He stayed in the position of Shangshu of the 2nd rank for 8 years, and was later dismissed because he fought the Jin War vigorously. Later, he was called in again, persuading the first emperor to take a tough attitude towards Jin, and assisting Li Zhenjai to break the Jin state's large-scale attack. During the reign of the first emperor, Taifu Yan and Li Zhenjai blocked the 3 major attacks of the kingdom of Jin. Such great achievements allowed him to be worshipped as a prime minister before the age of 50, and then he retreated bravely to teach in the Imperial Academy. It wasn't until the kingdom of Jin invaded again, and the princes fought for the throne and the front line retreated steadily that the first emperor died of a serious illness, and he came out to take power again. At that time, the Great Zhou was in chaos, the princes who accompanied the army died or fled, and the remaining princes in Chang'an city were also in civil strife. Taifu Yan found another way to help Tuzong's grandson, King Qin, to the throne, who is now Emperor Jinjian. As soon as Emperor Jinjian came to power, regardless of Taifu Yan's persuasion, he insisted on moving the capital to Linan city, and because of this, he gave up half of the country in the north. This is also the reason why the people and some officials criticized Yan Taifu. Taifu Yan chose the son of the first emperor. Will Desu be better? At least there will be no embarrassment of only half of the country, so many people will be reduced to second-class people and oppressed by barbarians. However, Taifu Yan has always been in charge of the battle, and he has sheltered General Yuan and other generals who are in charge of the battle, and he even opposes extravagance and corruption, so he has a good reputation among the people and King Liu. He has served as the chief examiner of Chunwei many times, and is almost the teacher of officials who have passed the rank of Jinshi in the past 2 decades. Before coming to Ankan, Taifu Yan was already full of peaches and plums. For example, Qin Xiang and Fan Siwen have all listened to his classes. Passed the exam when he was the chief examiner. There are countless students like this, and the respected elder passed away, but the funeral was deserted, and there were only an odd number of road sacrifices. It is also because of the small number of people that Fan Zijian's road sacrifice was set up, and everyone came to see it. Except for Prime Minister Qin, those who came to set up the road sacrifice were all students who respected Taifu Yan in their hearts. Jinchi, who had nothing to do with him, also came to the road sacrifice, feeling angry and uncomfortable in his heart. Even a child with yellow hair knew to respect the Taifu, but those who had been taught by the Taifu himself misunderstood him. It can be said that most of those who will come to sacrifice are Taifu Yan's brainless fans. When Fan Zijian hurried over after finishing the business at hand, he received some friendly nods. Fan Zijian responded politely with some confusion. Seeing that the shed had just been erected and the white flag had not had time to hang up, he hurriedly hung up the white flag by himself. It would be better to pay attention to the impression of him on the people here. The funeral team of the Yan family came from a distance, very low-key. Although the people were angry, fortunately no one was making trouble at this moment. Fan Zijian followed the team of the Yan family to Yangfu Temple outside the city. Back to his ancestral home for burial, so the coffin can only be temporarily stored in Yangfu Temple. When Qin Xiang came back from Yangfu Temple, he plunged into the study room. He wanted to grab the job of negotiating peace no matter what, and he must facilitate the peace talks. His aides were puzzled by this. "My lord, even the Yan family can't bear the rumors. It's not good for you to go too deep at this time." Qin Xiang said indifferently, "The truth of this matter is your own concern, you just have to draw up a set of agreement content with me." Qin Xiang snorted coldly in his heart. The Yan family suffered such a big backlash because of too much contrast, but he had been on the sidelines from the very beginning, and he had already been stigmatized as a traitor. People hate him even more, and there won't be much backlash. "My lord, the court has reached a final conclusion on the matter of peace negotiations. We just need to wait for the emperor to send someone to go. You took the initiative to take on this job, didn't you take the blame?" The staff still couldn't help but persuaded. After all, those who mixed with Qin would only get better when he got well. Qin Xiang frowned displeasedly. "Go as soon as I tell you, where is there so much nonsense?" The staff choked, and could only resign themselves to their fate and retreat. Qin Xiang looked at the pen holder on the desk in a daze. If he could, he would not have taken the initiative to take on this job, but in order to save his life and the Qin family, he had no choice but to do so. Taifu Yan advocated the peace negotiation for the sake of the Great Zhou, and he was also for the sake of the Great Zhou, but the fundamental purpose was to keep the Qin family. The Qin family can only exist if the Great Zhou is here, otherwise, it is better to fall into the hands of the barbarians than to fall into the hands of the rebels. If the Zhou died at the hands of the rebels, I am afraid that the Qin family will be the second family to be cleared after the royal family. After all, he was too young and vigorous before, and he did not think carefully. He ruined his reputation for the sake of his future. Otherwise, I wouldn't worry too much now. But who would have thought that the emperor would make such a foolish move, completely igniting the bandits in the entire Great Zhou, turning them from bandits into rebels, and forming an alliance. Otherwise, with his support, it would be no problem for Dezhou to persist for another 30 or 40 years. At that time, the Qin family would have accumulated enough capital to resign and return home. Who can remember the silent Qin family in 2010? It's a pity that everything is ruined now. He can only try his best to deal with Zixia, hoping to turn the tide of Dazhu. If it doesn't work, he can also help Zixia or the kingdom of Jin to carve up Dazhu. As long as all the rebels in the country are wiped out, the Qin family will have the way to survive. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu. Chapter 525. Dezhou formally proposed a peace negotiation with Jingguo and Zixia. Jingguo only hesitated for a moment before agreeing, retreating the army 3 li to garrison, staring eye to eye with Dezhou's army, waiting for the arrival of the peace envoy. They have been attacking for more than a month, but they have not been able to occupy a city or town. Instead, they have lost many warriors. Compared with the overwhelming situation of Zixia, Jingguo is also a little panicked. Seeing how General Yuan and Qi Ziyuan are guarding against death, it is difficult for them to get a bargain. It is better to make a peace agreement with Zixia's offensive and ask for more old coins and silks. Benefits like tea. The kingdom of Jin is willing to cease the war, but Zixia is not. They have already occupied a lot of territory and invested a lot in this war. They had the idea of destroying Dezhou, but they didn't reject it outright. Instead, they said they couldn't make the decision on this matter and had to wait for the king's order. However, the attack should still be attacked, and the land that should be attacked should still be attacked. The courtiers of Dazhu and Emperor Jinjian were so angry that they were itching their teeth, but they couldn't stop them. Dazhu was very capable in arguing with each other, but he was attacking the city with a dull head. Could you ask him to return? You are brave enough to scream, but will you pay it back? But now that the domestic forces are insufficient, the Great Zhou cannot deter Zixia at all, nor can it stop their footsteps. In addition, Emperor Jinjian's main force is placed on the domestic rebels, making Zixia feel as if he has entered a land of no one for a while. Easy, there is a Lu Zixia army that can even collect 2 cities a day. Although Emperor Jinjian was more afraid of the rebel bandits, he could not allow Zixia to attack the city like this. Otherwise, when he suppressed the rebellion, the Great Zhou would be completely occupied by Zixia. What kind of emperor would he still be? Emperor Jinjian finally ordered the transfer of General Yuan's 100,000 troops and Qi Ziyuan's 50,000 troops, divided into 2 groups to block Zixia. Wan Dejin went straight down from the East Road, crossed Huainan West Road and went straight to Jinghu North Road to block the Zixia army. Emperor Jinjian originally wanted to send a general directly from the court to lead the army, but he gave up after thinking about it. This is not the time to weaken the power of General Yuan and Qi Ziyuan, and it would be more successful to let their people lead the army by themselves. Moreover, the court really couldn't send out any generals for actual combat, otherwise he wouldn't have used Qi Heiran in the first place. Qi Ziyuan thought for a long time after receiving the holy intention, and then called Rong Xian to discuss it. After a while, he decided to send Mu Shi and Zhang Ziyi to lead the army. Mu Shi led 20,000 troops, and Zhang Ziyi led 30,000 troops. Only the 5 of them knew about Qi Ziyuan's plan to rebel, while Mu Shi and Zhang Ziyi didn't know anything about it. Zhang Ziyi has been with Qi Ziyuan for a long time, so he naturally trusts him, but if the rebellion is involved, the matter will not be certain, so Qi Ziyuan thought for a long time, and decided to hide this matter first, divide the army into 2, Zhang Ziyi only needs to stop the Zixia army wholeheartedly. As for Mu Shi, Qi and Mu's family are relatives by marriage. Qi Ziyuan thought that Mu Shi had already boarded the bandit ship, and decided to tell him the matter, so that when he repelled the Zixia army, he should also pay attention to taking in refugees and recruiting soldiers. Their source of troops. Qi Ziyuan found Mu Shi, and talked for a long time in the study. When he left the Qi mansion, he had no expression on his face, and he rode home sullenly. Zhang Ziyi only thought that Qi Ziyuan was explaining to Mu Shi why he led fewer troops than him, and he didn't think too much about it. He was even a little complacent in private. Not on him. Qi Ziyuan was more convinced in his heart. But when Mu Shi returned home, he was so angry that he picked up a pen and wrote a letter to scold his daughter. How could she hide such a big matter from him? He is not very angry and anxious. Although he is not very literate, he has learned a lot because of his travels in the early years. In his opinion, Dazu has long been on the verge of collapse. This area, this is Qi Ziyuan's base camp. Even if Qi Ziyuan fails to become emperor in the future, their Mu family will be able to keep it safe, and at worst they will go back home to hunt. But the daughter is different. Aling married Qi Heiran, so he must have lived and died together. He could escape with his family, but he couldn't take Aling away. In the palace. How could Mu Shi not be angry or nervous? Seeing him come back angrily, Xu Huanyang went to the kitchen to make some small things for him, and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Mu Shi put down his pen, put away the letter pretending not to care, and said, "The general sent me to lead the army to resist the Xixia army. By then, there will be only a few of your mothers left at home. I am a little worried and want to call my brother, cousin, and sister-in-law come to stay at home for a while, so they can take care of you." Xu Huanyang laughed when she heard the words, "Bowen has already established a family, so why bother my cousin and sister-in-law all the time?" Xu Huanyang put the plate in front of him, and sighed, "It's a mess outside. I don't know if Aling is doing well in the capital." "Don't worry, that's where the emperor stays, and it's the safest place in the world." Xu Huanyang breathed a sigh of relief when she heard the words, and laughed again. "You are right, the place where the emperor stays is heavily guarded, and Aling should be safe and sound, otherwise I am really worried about her bringing her little grandson alone. The team is broken, and even Mr. Fan's workshop can't deliver goods, otherwise I can ask them to bring some small clothes to our grandson." The more Xu Huanyang talked, the more melancholy she became. Her daughter is still so young, so why did she have a child? It's as if Aling was clamoring to hang on her husband's body yesterday and wanted to go hunting in the woods together, but in a blink of an eye, their family moved to Hanshong Mansion, Aling got married and had a child, and Bowen has grown into a young man. Seeing that Xu Huanyang was in a trance, Mu Shi knew that she was thinking wildly again, so he quickly took a book and pressed the letter down, and hugged her to comfort her. And General Yuan also divided his troops into two groups, one was led by the next general, and the other was led by his eldest son Yuan Zhao, and they went south together. As the two armies from the east and the west moved south, the progress of the Xixia army slowed down, but the offensive became more and more fierce. The other party failed to please. The emperor breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this, and then considered releasing the officials and family members in the palace. Because they have lived in the palace for a long time, and if they stay, not only the courtiers will have objections, but the people outside who are full and have nothing to do to stare at the royal family will also spit at him. Fortunately, both Qi Ziyuan and General Yuan's troops have been reduced now, and with the army of the Kingdom of Jin restraining them, the emperor thinks it is not impossible to let them out of the palace, since they are still in Linen City anyway. Therefore, although Mu Yangling and the others were able to leave the palace, their range of activities was restricted. As long as they did not leave the city, they could go anywhere. The reason is also readily available. In order to protect their safety, the Xixia soldiers who were going to assassinate them in the front team have been caught, but it is not sure whether any fish slipped through the net. In addition, Xixia has not yet confirmed whether they will send other assassination teams, so in order to protect their safety, they could not go out of the city, and there was also a circle of imperial guards outside the mansion to protect them. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 526. When Mu Yangling and Li Jinghua returned to the Qi mansion, they were all greatly relieved. Although the food and drink were served in the palace, and there was no problem in terms of safety, talking to the queen and the concubines in the harem was tiring. "I lost a lot of weight in a month." Seeing that Mu Yangling also breathed a sigh of relief, Li Jinghua smiled and said, "I asked the kitchen to make some delicious food, and we will have a good get-together in the evening." Wang Ma stepped in quickly, and said with a smile, "Eldest grandma, fourth grandma, I just heard from the East Mansion that my wife has ordered someone to prepare meals, and I want a family reunion dinner tonight. Mu Yangling and Li Jinghua looked at each other, knowing that Qi Feng probably wanted to ask them about the situation in the palace, so they reluctantly agreed. Just as Mu Yangling was about to say goodbye and leave, Xiaobao stumbled out, hugged her calf, raised her head and said pitifully, "Auntie, Xiong Xiong." Mu Yangling had a dark face and said with a straight face, "Your brother is asleep and can't play with you." Nothing good happened when the two children got together. Every time they played, they forgot to eat and drink. In the end, they either couldn't help but cried on the spot, or they were so hungry that they cried. She didn't know what was so fun. Can't speak a few words, the other can't even sit still, but can talk to the chattering, talking for a long time without getting bored. Li Jinghua obviously also thought of the great achievements of the two of them, so he quickly pulled Xiaobao to persuade him, "My brother is asleep, and you are going to take a nap. Let's go and play with my brother when we wake up." Xiaobao said with moist eyes, "Sleep with Xiong Xiong." He held Mu Yangling's calf tightly, no matter how Li Jinghua pulled it, she couldn't move it, and she didn't dare to use too much force for fear of hurting the child, so in the end she had no choice but to say, "Aling, you should hug him and let them the two brothers sleep together, and ask the nanny to be tougher, and when the time comes, they will be picked up to nurse and pee, so we can't spoil them anymore." Mu Yangling could only agree, picked up Xiaobao and went to Xiahua courtyard. The son was indeed sleeping, occupying half of the bed with his hands and feet spread out, and his stomach was covered with a thin quilt, sleeping soundly. When Xiaobao entered the door, he also silenced his voice. After being put on the bed by his fourth aunt, he lay gently beside him, closing his eyes obediently and pretending to be asleep. Mu Yangling looked funny, covered him with a small quilt, patted him softly, and said in a low voice, "Good baby, go to sleep." Xiaobao originally wanted to pretend to be asleep and get up after his aunt left, but he couldn't help falling asleep gradually under the soft voice of his aunt. Seeing that he was fast asleep, Mu Yangling got up and left, leaving the nanny to stay in the house. Li Shun was sorting out the things they took out from the palace. During that time, the emperor and the empress rewarded them with a lot of things in order to appease them. They were all good things with high ornamental value or collection value. Although they were not as practical as real money, but Mu Yangling obviously prefers this. She asked Li Shun to make a register, and then put the things into their small warehouse. Guyu muttered in a low voice, "I don't know if the East Mansion will come to ask for it." Mu Yangling raised his brows slightly, and Guyu said in a low voice, "Fourth Grandma doesn't know, after you and Grandma entered the palace, the mothers from the East Mansion often came here to borrow things. Mom locked all the valuables in the storeroom, saying that you took the key away, so she prevaricated. The Qi family is not short of money," Mu Yangling muttered. "Why does the Wu family seem to have fallen into the eyes of money?" Guyu pursed her lips and smiled, and said in a low voice, "It should be that the uncle and the fourth master are not short of money. The fourth grandma doesn't know if she is not in charge of the family. In fact, the mansion is not that rich. The master is only the fourth rank censor Zhong Cheng, and he doesn't have much salary. There are not many fields, and the filial piety at the bottom is even more incomparable with the 6 departments, and there is not much left to support the family. Seriously, there are not as many fields in the mansion as fourth grandma has in the suburbs of Beijing." Mu Yangling was dumbfounded. "How do you know these things? She is the master, Guyu actually knows things that she doesn't even know?" Guyu bowed her head in embarrassment, and said cowardly, "After the grandmas went to the palace, the maids in our 2 courtyards were assigned to various places to work as helpers, and the slaves were assigned to the big kitchen, where there were many people coming and going. It's the old people in the mansion, and the shopping is frequent, so if you listen to it a lot, you'll know. This is the talent who collects news." Mu Yangling looked at Guyu and sighed. Mu Yangling decided to go back and talk to Wang Ma, and he must focus on cultivating Guyu, which will definitely be useful in the future. Mu Yangling nodded and said, I know about this, put away the things, and they don't know exactly what we got back. If they really come to ask for it, it's okay for us to give 1 or 2 things. As long as it doesn't touch her bottom line, she doesn't mind appeasing the other party. But Qi Feng didn't ask about this matter. At the dinner table, he just asked about their situation in the palace, what the queen said when they left the palace, and inquired about brother Qi Ziyuan's affairs. Qi Feng was also very helpless, and he didn't want to ask about the situation of his daughter-in-law and sons, but the key point was that the letters written to him by the eldest brother and the 4th child were just simple greetings, without a single word of value, and the relationship between their father and son was long gone. The deterioration and indifference reached this point. Even if he could lower his face to ask, they might not be able to answer, so Qi Feng simply stopped pulling that face. But he didn't get any news from Li Jinghua and Mu Yangling. He knew what they knew, and even he knew more than them, but seeing them both looked a little dazed, and Li Jinghua also said, my uncle seldom tells me about the outside world. All the letters are to ask me to raise Xiaobao well and be filial to my parents-in-law. The rest is to let me live in the capital with peace of mind and listen to the court's arrangements. Qi Feng looked at Mu Yangling, and Mu Yangling hurriedly said, elder-in-law, as you know, I don't know much, and I don't know much. Most of the letters that the 4th master wrote to me were about the scenery and customs along the way. Military, how about I show the letter to my father-in-law? Qi Feng's face darkened, so he wouldn't read the letter from his daughter-in-law. He hated the 4th son in his heart. He sent back a letter every day, and he thought they were talking about something big. It was a waste of resources. Qi Feng was indignant, and the meal was extremely boring. To the 2 grandsons, Qi Feng only looked up and praised that he was very smart, and then he didn't say anything. Li Jinghua frowned slightly, feeling a little dissatisfied in her heart, turned her head and glanced at Qi Ming, the eldest son of Qi Shaosheng. Seeing him snuggling up to Wu's side, running to Qi Feng's side and looking up to act like a baby with him, she was even more displeased. Mu Yangling felt that Li Jinghua's mood was not right. Although she still smiled appropriately, she just felt that something was wrong, so she was not in the mood and stayed there. Seeing the little bear yawn, she got up and took the opportunity to say goodbye. When they walked out of the main courtyard and they were the only ones on the whole road, Mu Yangling asked curiously, "What's the matter, sister-in-law?" There is no distinction between the father-in-law and the concubine. He paid too much attention to the second uncle's child, and left Xiaobao aside. If this is in an ordinary family, it will be the root of the chaos. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 527. Mu Yangling blinked, and said puzzledly, "My father-in-law has never paid much attention to elder brother and Heiran, and my sister-in-law was not very angry before. But Xiaobao is a grandson. If the father-in-law is too eccentric, even if the family knows that it is the father-in-law's problem, they will neglect Xiaobao and add a lot of speculation." Li Jinghua was a little worried, and lowered her voice and said, "Although the second uncle and the third uncle came from the Wu family when they were still concubines, but because the Wu family was restored, they have always regarded themselves as legitimate sons outside, and the eldest grandson in the mansion is not from the family. It's not appropriate to be a long-term house. If the father-in-law's attitude is so obviously biased, there will definitely be a big battle between our first and fourth rooms and the second and third rooms. The uncle and the others are far away at the border, and there are only a few of us women and children in the house. Li Jinghua is from a noble family, so he is the most sensitive to such matters. The eldest son and grandson have always been the most important inheritance of a family. The eldest son's identity is clear, so he can remotely control the Qi family at the border. Buying the elders of the clan to exclude Qi Feng is due to his strength, but a large part of it is because he is the eldest son of the Qi family. But the identity of her son Xiaobao's eldest grandson seems to be shrouded in thick fog. Is Qi Ming the eldest grandson or the eldest grandson? After all, Xiaobao is only ranked second in the family. If the father-in-law dotes on Qi Ming and insists that Qi Shaosheng is also a legitimate son, it means that Xiaobao will lose the support of the entire Qi family. The eldest son owns the whole clan. This is not just talk, it is a concept deep in his heart. Mu Yangling couldn't understand it, because in her era, the family concept had already disintegrated. Everyone lived in a small family, and their behavior was bound by the laws of the country, and their conscience was bound by morality. Unlike this era, the family could execute privately clan people. In some respects, clan rules even override the law. That's why Li Jinghua was worried. She was thinking, should she take over the butlership of the Qi family for her son, so as to keep her son's position? Mu Yangling's brain circuit was finally connected to Li Jinghua. She hurriedly said, "Sister-in-law, don't worry, elder brother is the most promising in the family. Even if you don't rely on the family, Xiaobao will not be worse than others. I think it's better for us to stay in the yard and live an honest life." If Qi Xiaoyuan had no intention of rebelling, Li Jinghua would go ahead and grab it, but Qi Xiaoyuan might rebel in 2 years. She went to great lengths to grab the power, and if she doesn't live in the mansion later, isn't it a waste of energy? The uncle is promising, but you can't just look down on the family. As the old saying goes, don't bully the young and poor, let alone a family. There are no more prosperous people in the clan now, but there are so many people in the clan, and there are many children and young people. These are connections. Mu Yangling looked at the worried Li Jinghua, and felt that the most worried thing in this world was indeed her parents. How old is Xiaobao? So she started worrying about her connections. Looking back at her son, she felt very sorry for him. It seemed that she didn't think about it, and kept her son's future with the idea of fighting for it on her own. She only wants her son to have a happy childhood, read the books he should read, learn the skills he should learn, and pay attention to his personality. As for what he will do in the future, how he will do it seems to be a matter for him after he grows up. Mu Yangling propped his chin in a daze. Why did he feel like he was getting old all of a sudden? I don't know if Qi Heiran has planned his son's future. Mu Yangling wrote to Qi Heiran, apologizing for her son's negligence. Compared with her sister-in-law, she seemed to think too little about being a mother. Qi Heiran also became distressed when he got the letter. He really didn't expect his son's future. He thought that since he was so good, his son shouldn't be too bad. Does he still need to think about him? But he didn't write these words in the letter, and Aling was already blaming herself. If he wrote like this, her anger would definitely burn on him, so Qi Heiran thought for a long time, and then told Mu Yangling that at this stage, we only need to let as long as the son thrives. As for the future, they have planned it now, and it will be useless if the son doesn't like it in the future. It's better to wait for him to grow up and ask him what he wants to do, and we will help. Everything depends on the wishes of the child. Mu Yangling didn't expect Qi Heiran to be so open-minded, more open-minded than her, looked at his son who was thrashing about on the couch and wanted to get up, carried him into his arms, and said with a smile, "Son, you are so lucky, you can do whatever you want in the future, but your father said, it depends on your wishes." It didn't take a few years for Mu Yangling to know that Qi Heiran's words were used to coax her. It's a joke that the child's wishes are the main thing. Qi Heiran yelled arrogantly in his heart before the child was born. My lord is going to have a son. From now on, our family will be generals with father and son. Xiong stared at his mother, waved his small hand to grab her hair, grabbed it and stuffed it into his mouth. Mu Yangling turned pale with fright, hurriedly freed the hair from his claws, and patted him gently. The little hand said, "You child, why do you stuff everything into your mouth?" Seeing that he couldn't catch the hair, Xiong threw his head into her arms, arched left and right, and tightly grasped her skirt with his hands. Mu Yangling was a little helpless. "You eat too much. You have milk, vegetable soup, and custard to supplement. Why are you still thinking about eating now? Just like your father. Even so, she carried the baby to the inner room to nurse. After coming out, Lishun said excitedly, "Fourth grandma, the eldest grandma has taken over the central government of the mansion, and will share the affairs of the mansion with the second and third grandmas didn't even eat lunch." Mu Yangling was taken aback, and asked, "Whose idea is this?" "It's the wife herself," Li Chun said triumphantly. "Several wives from the clan came to play at home and mentioned that the eldest grandma is the eldest daughter-in-law, and that the eldest grandma should be in charge of the affairs of the house. Grandma is pregnant and has a baby, so it is understandable to leave the affairs of the house to the second grandma and third grandma, but now the second young master is over 1 year old, and the eldest grandma is also free, so it is the housekeeper to share the worries for the wife." Although she was angry, she didn't dare to speak loudly in front of the wives, so she agreed, but let the second and third grandmas help the eldest grandma with housekeeping, saying that they were helping the eldest grandma to share the affairs of the house. Mu Yangling was speechless secretly. It has only been a few days since she returned the letter to Qi Heiran, and Li Jinghua has already taken power here. This kind of speed is really beyond the reach of mere mortals. Mu Yangling is not good at these inner house affairs. To show her support, she waved her hand and said, "In this case, then go and tell grandma. From now on, Xiaobao will be placed with me, and I will take care of it. She just needs to go to the house." Thing. Li Chun responded with a smile, turned around and told the eldest grandma. The servants of Zayatang and Zayahua Yuan were very excited about grandma's taking power, which meant that their status in the mansion had risen, and they would be less likely to make trouble in the mansion in the future. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 528. Li Jinghua led Xiaobao over, followed by a string of maids and women. She handed Xiaobao to Mu Yangling. "I thought about it, let Xiaobao stay with you for the time being, and wait for me to take care of the house. Let him come back to me when he is clear." Mu Yangling was stunned. "Xiaobao wants to live with me." What she understood was bringing and taking care of Li Jinghua, who brought Xiaobao over when she was doing business and asked her to take it with her. Anyway, there are so many servants here, and there are only 2 children, so it's very simple. But looking at the luggage carried by the woman behind, Li Jinghua obviously wanted Xiaobao to live here. Li Jinghua asked Xiaobao to play with Xiaoxiang. Hearing this, she nodded and smiled. "I just want to live here with you." She paused and said, "Although my yard is airtight now, I want to be a housekeeper. There must be a lot of people coming and going, maybe there will be a gap in the future. I have a limited mind, and I can't watch the child all the time, so I think it's safer to put the child with you." She hastily snatched the housekeeper right. Wu and Su and others will definitely not accept it, and there are 2 ways to exclude her. One is to make her sick, and naturally she cannot be a housekeeper if she is not in good health, and the other is to let Xiaobao have an accident. Naturally, he didn't want to take care of these things, and the housekeeper's right could be taken back as a matter of course. Li Jinghua has lived in the internal struggle since birth, and learned to walk 1 step and see 10 steps by hearing and seeing. She can guarantee her own safety, even if she can't. If she is willing to gamble and admit defeat, she can't blame anyone. But Xiaobao was the only one who didn't dare to gamble. This child is more important than her lifeblood. She may only have this child in her life, so she will not allow him to be negligent. In addition, his body is weaker than ordinary children, so Li Jinghua dare not gamble. Originally, she wanted to put Wenkui next to Xiaobao, and she was relieved to have Wenkui staring at her all the time, but after 2 days of doing so, Li Jinghua changed her mind. Wen Kui treated her wholeheartedly, but she still couldn't treat Xiaobao wholeheartedly. When she stayed by Xiaobao's side, her eyes were still on her. This made Li Jinghua very dissatisfied and worried even more. She had no choice but to put it here in Mu Yangling. After all, apart from Wen Kui, Li Jinghua trusted Mu Yangling the most. Moreover, Mu Yangling is very fond of the child. She rarely leaves the child's side in a day, and almost takes the child with her when she eats and sleeps. Even when she draws the bow for an hour a day, she is also in the inner room, and the child is not far away. Moreover, Li Jinghua had to admit that although Mu Yangling's methods were rough and he rarely managed his servants carefully, they were still quite safe. Maybe it's because she has a right-hand assistant, Wang Ma, and there are Li Shun and Gu Yu in the house to help. Even though the yard is mixed with servants of the Qi family, it is still orderly and well organized. In short, after analyzing the pros and cons, Li Jinghua wanted to put Xiaobao in Mu Yangling's place to raise her. Anyway, she lives next door and came to see her son after finishing her work every day. There is no difference. Mu Yangling, on the other hand, looked at the two children who were already sitting chattering excitedly in the national language of the baby and nodded. Anyway, one child is raised, and the two children are also raised. Knowing that he was going to live with his fourth aunt, Xiaobao climbed down excitedly, screamed and walked around the room several times excitedly, then climbed up on the couch and hugged his younger brother, saying, "Follow Xiong Xiong, Xiong Xiong, sleep." Mu Yangling touched his head and said, "Yes, you can sleep with Xiong Xiong at night, as long as you don't hold him down." Xiaobao showed a big smile. The two children played excitedly for a long time. After all, the little bear was young, so he fell asleep immediately after eating and drinking. Xiaobao fiddled with the toys boredly, feeling sleepy, and fell asleep beside the little bear. Mu Yangling covered the two children with a small quilt, sent them out, and took his big bow. He stood firmly with his legs apart, looked sharply at a jade ring hanging in the corner of the room, and pulled the bow. "Fill it up, let it go, fill it up again." Before Mu Yangling came, Qi Ziyuan asked her to hide her clumsiness. Her ability is the trump card to save her life, so after arriving in the capital, she didn't dare to go to the courtyard to practice archery. She always stayed in the house or in Qi Heiran's training hall behind. Practiced. Since having a son, Mu Yangling has fixed the location in the house. It's not that she doesn't want to go to the martial arts hall, it's naturally more open and comfortable to draw a bow there, but she will miss her child, and every time she practices for less than a quarter of an hour, she will want to come back to see what her son is doing, whether he is crying, whether the servant's dedicated. In the end, I had no choice but to practice in the house. Anyway, the child spends most of the day sleeping. It is enough for her to practice for an hour while they are sleeping. Just make sure that her foot is still stable, her arm strength does not weaken, and her head does not drop. That's fine. In the mansion, no one except Wang Ma, Li Shun, Gu Yu, and Li Jinghua knew that she was practicing this in the house. Maybe Wen Kui could guess it. After all, she knew when she ran to save Qi Ziyuan and Qi Heiran. After practicing for an hour, Mu Yangling asked Li Shun to fetch water to take a bath, changed the clothes at home, and went to see the child. The two of them were sound asleep, and there was no sign of waking up at all. The nanny quickly apologized and said with a smile, "The young masters probably played too excitedly, so they need to sleep more." Mu Yangling nodded slightly, "I know, you go down to eat first, and come to see them later." It was already time for lunch. Mu Yangling saw Xiaobao's wet nurse Wang Momo getting up and going out, so she quickly stopped her and said, "Did you get your food from the big kitchen or the small kitchen?" Wang Momo immediately bowed and said, "Go back to fourth grandma, the servants' meals are all made in the small kitchen, and they need to go back to Zayed Hall." Mu Yangling nodded slightly, thought for a while, and said, I'll ask someone to move the small kitchen to my yard later, and you and the two young masters can use the food in the yard, so you don't need to make another trip. Grandma Wang agreed. Mu Yangling immediately found Wang Ma and said, there are people coming and going in the sister-in-law's yard now, and it's not safe to put the small kitchen there. You can ask someone to move the small kitchen here later. Except for the inconvenience of the cook, the kitchen is not safe. All the servants will be replaced, and they will all be replaced by people in our yard, and we will choose servants who will stay in Jingzhou Mansion with the whole family. The big grandma's meal. When it's ready, send it over. Besides, if Xiaobao stays here, I'm afraid my sister-in-law will eat 3 meals a day here. Wang Ma, sister-in-law, is mainly worried that someone will take advantage of the chaos in the mansion to harm the young masters. So you must take good care of the door. No matter how lively Zayed Hall is, people from Wang Ma's place will seldom go out and let people in less. Seeing Mu Yangling's sharp eyes, Wang Ma shuddered and responded respectfully. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 529. Little Treasure and Little Bear lived a happy life. The two cubs stayed together around the clock, even feeding together. In the morning, Xiaobao wakes up first, asks someone to wash his face and dress him obediently, then obediently eats a small bowl of rice porridge, and is carried to his mother for mother-child interaction. Going back to the house to sleep and sleeping in the cage, the child is not afraid of sleeping too much, but afraid of sleeping too little. Then when he woke up again, his younger brother Xiong would open his eyes, and grasp his 2 little fingers softly and fragrantly. The 2 little ones nurse together, and then they can play happily together. Little Treasure prefers to play with his toys in the house, or tease his younger brother, but his younger brother likes going outside very much. Almost as soon as he is full, he calls his fourth aunt Ag. Then Mu Yangling will take the two to go around the small garden and sit in the gazebo for a while. At this time, it is already slightly cool. Mu Yangling will wrap up the 2 children tightly, hold the little bear in his arms, and let them turning his head around to look at the scenery in the garden. Little Treasure would pick up some dead branches with short legs, tear grass and pick flowers, and give them to his younger brother as a treasure. Mu Yangling never stopped them, just be careful not to let their backs sweat or catch cold. In the end, Xiaobao not only made himself dirty, but also made the little bear covered in dirt and grass leaves. Wang Momo looked terrified, but seeing Mu Yangling kept watching with a smile, she didn't stop her. Just relax a little bit. You can run and jump to be healthy and smart. Wang Momo took this sentence very seriously. The more naughty the children in the countryside, the better they survived, and Li Jinghua just came over to take a look and ignored it. That's why Xiaobao felt that his wonderful day had come. The fourth aunt had always spoiled him, unlike when he was with his mother. He wanted to eat sugar porridge, but they didn't give it to him. They all fed him the milk of the wet nurse. After returning home at noon and drinking milk, Mu Yangling asked someone to hold them to digest food for a while before letting them take a nap. Generally speaking, the 2 children will sleep for an hour and a half, wake up and continue playing. When the lights are turned off at night, they will sleep as well as adults. They were together all day, but they were so excited the next morning as if they were meeting for the first time. Mu Yangling couldn't imagine why the relationship between the 2 of them was so good. Could it be because they were the only 2 of them at home? Same age. Children will indeed be more able to play with children. Mu Yangling was still considering whether to play the 2 children with the other 2 children in the Qi mansion. He couldn't lose the chance to make friends because of the grievances of the adults, but Mu Yangling deliberately bring the 2 little ones in front of those 2, and as a result, apart from looking at each other curiously, the 4 children played their own games and divided into 3 groups. Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang were in one group, and the remaining 2 were divided into groups. Faction. Mu Yangling immediately dismissed this idea, brought back 2 of his own, and let them flop around in the yard by themselves. The weather was getting colder, and after the first snow fell, Mu Yangling compressed their outdoor activities to half an hour. Little Treasure didn't care, he didn't have much interest in going outside to play, but Little Bear had been making a fuss for a long time. He already knew he can crawl and sit, and as long as he is awake, he will not stop for a moment, which fully demonstrates the characteristics that he is Chihayron's son. So in order to gain more time for outdoor activities, this kid did everything he could. After finding out that acting like a spoiled child didn't work, he cried and cried. Mu Yangling was heartbroken and refused him hard-heartedly. If he cried, he would agree. What if the child cries for whatever he wants in the future? So even though Mu Yangling's heart was so soft that he gave up his arms and surrendered long ago, he still insisted on squatting in front of his son and looking him squarely, trying to maintain a serious face. Don't cry, we can talk slowly if we have something to say. You cry, mother will not agree to you, you have to find a reason to persuade mother. Little Xiang stopped crying, thinking that his mother agreed, so he stretched out his arms to be hugged by her. Mu Yangling hurriedly picked him up and coaxed him, you are still young, and it's cold outside, so you can't go out for such a long time. A day and a half is not long. The little bear was still young and couldn't understand it at all. He just thought that his mother had agreed to carry him out to play, so he pushed his body outwards and motioned for her to carry him out. Mu Yangling didn't move, took a small toy to tease him, and coaxed him softly, we'll go out when the weather gets warmer, or you can go out and play longer when you grow up. Little Xiang was taken aback, although he couldn't hear it, he still understood that his mother wouldn't take him out, so he let out a wow, closed his eyes and howled again. Mu Yangling had a headache. Wang Ma was annoyed and ridiculous while watching. Fourth grandma, the third young master is still young, how could he understand? You can hold him around the room a few times and try, and you will forget it after a while. Xiaobao saw that the fourth aunt repeatedly made his brother cry, and he didn't understand what the fourth aunt said, but this did not prevent him from knowing that the fourth aunt bullied his younger brother, so he rushed up and slapped Mu Yangling's arm, come on, and then took his little brother's little hand and coaxed, don't cry, bear, be good. While coaxing him, he stretched out his hand to hit Mu Yangling, indicating that he taught his fourth aunt a lesson for him. Li Jinghua saw it at the door, and was stunned for a moment. Xiaobao coaxed his younger brother, seeing him crying all the time, and then he also cried wow, and shouted at Mu Yangling while crying, bad guy, aunt, bad guy. Mu Yangling was even more flustered, coaxing this and that, so busy. When Xiao Xiang heard his brother crying, he stopped slowly, stared at his brother with 2 lines of tears in his eyes, and twitched twice from time to time, obviously the sequelae of crying hard. Mu Yangling hugged him distressedly. Xiao Xiang looked at his brother crying, but suddenly pointed to his nose and laughed, and rushed over to kiss Xiaobao's face full of tears and snot superior. Li Jinghua couldn't help but burst into laughter, but Mu Yangling watched his son get tangled up. This kid must be too stupid. The 2 sisters-in-law washed the 2 children and put them together. Li Jinghua said with a smile, if the child wants to go out, you can hold him around in each room. How can he understand those big principles when you tell him? Mu Yangling murmured, Xiaobao has been talking to him, and I have seen him nodding in a serious manner several times. I thought the child could understand. Li Jinghua laughed upon hearing this, why are you acting like a child? In the end, Little Bear failed to fight for his own rights. He only had half an hour a day to go out for a walk, and he had to stay in the house for the rest of the time. Mu Yangling wrote to Chihayron about what happened today like a joke. Chihayron despised his son in the letter, and if he wanted to go out to play, he could just order the servant girl to carry him out in private. He even came to you specifically. Could it be that he was pretending to be big? Cry, the girl who served him dared to disobey him. This one won't work, find the next one, and you will always find someone who is timid and will take him out to play. If you find you will block the back road, Barbara. Mu Yangling was furious when he received the letter, and wrote to scold him, thinking that he was teaching their son badly, but fortunately the child was not handed over to him. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 530. Entering winter, it is only a year. The outside world has undergone earth-shaking changes. There are wars throughout the whole week. Except for Linen City, which is relatively stable, wars are happening in other places. Because the weather is getting colder, the war is temporarily stalemate. Neither the Xixia army nor the rebels went any further. But the situation didn't improve. The ministers of the entire imperial court didn't have a trace of joy. Emperor Jinjian, who had always been used to being lazy and enjoying himself, didn't breathe a sigh of relief. Because of the cold weather, many people who were homeless due to the war were even more distressed. Exudes a dead air and heavy depression. Even if the emperor was not smart enough, he would not leave the palace, but he could still feel the oppression on the minister's face. In the end, if they couldn't resolve that depression, they could only perish in the explosion of that depression. The outside world is changing, and the Qi mansion is also changing. Li Jinghua successfully suppressed the three Wu's mother-in-law and daughter-in-law with 1-on-1 and 3, and successfully controlled the entire Qi mansion. The servants all bowed down at Li Jinghua's knees in unison. And Ziyahua Yuan seems to have traveled outside the entire Qi mansion. Since Xiaobao lived in Ziyahua Yuan, the access control of Ziyahua Yuan was very strict, and the servants rarely interacted with people in the mansion. Mu Yangling followed around the clock behind the two children. Even if they leave, it will not take more than 2/4 of an hour, but Li Jinghua will come here to eat and drink, and only bring 2 girls, Wen Qivenmian, so that Wu and the others can't use their means. With Li Jinghua completely in power, they couldn't even touch those 2 children. After the danger in the Qi mansion was within Li Jinghua's control, she began to think about letting her son move back. Xiaobao, who had been in love with Xiangxiang's brother for 3 months, was beaten to death and refused to go back. He hugged a pillar in Ziyahua Yuan and refused to let go, crying loudly in the direction of Xiangxiang. Xiangxiang didn't know why his brother was crying, but seeing his brother crying so miserably, he howled along with him. He was in good health and strong, even though he was nearly a year younger than his brother. His howling voice still directly overwhelmed him and went straight to the sky. Li Jinghua didn't expect the 2 children to react so strongly, and was a little embarrassed for a while. Mu Yangling tried to reason with them. Xiaobao, you live in the yard next door, and you come to play with your brother every day, but you don't stay together when you sleep at night. Why are you crying? Xiaobao sobbed and said, I want to sleep with my brother. He sobbed and looked at her with red and swollen eyes. Mu Yangling felt that this challenge was a bit big, so he couldn't make up his mind to go to see Li Jinghua. Li Jinghua sighed, squatted in front of Xiaobao and said pitifully, Xiaobao is going to accompany my younger brother. Don't you want to accompany your mother? My younger brother is accompanied by his aunt, and my mother lives there alone without anyone to accompany her woolen cloth. Confusion flashed in Xiaobao's eyes. Although he was smart, he was still young, and he still couldn't understand words that were too long. Mu Yangling hugged the little bear and said, Little bear is with aunt, and Xiaobao is with mother. This time Xiaobao looked at his mother and then at the little bear tangled up, and finally grabbed his mother's hand, and then his brother's hand, saying, Mine. Mu Yangling looked at him pitifully, What about auntie? Xiaobao waved his hand generously and said, Mine. Well, now 4 people can live in one room, but this is impossible, so they half persuaded, half forced for a long time. Xiaobao still promised to move back to Zayatang, but asked to come to accompany him the next day. Brother sleeps. Mu Yangling is completely fine. Li Jinghua just wanted to take care of his son when he was nearby, and didn't want to make him cry, so he agreed. Although he promised to come back to stay for one night every other day, in fact, this kid cried every night. There was no other way. In the end, Li Jinghua had no choice but to send him over. It turned out that he slept with Xiaoxiang in Zayahua courtyard for 2 or 3 nights, and then go back to Zayadatang and sleep for one night. Li Jinghua saw that the two brothers had a good relationship, so she let it go. Anyway, in her son's heart, her status as a biological mother will never change. And a good relationship between the son and the bear is also very beneficial. She may only have such a child in her life. Qi Ziyuan will definitely have a bastard in the future, but after all, he is not born to a mother, and there are conflicts of interest. Xiaobao has little brothers to support him. He has a good relationship with Xiaoxiang and is a cousin. In the future, we can help each other and help each other, which is not bad. That's why Li Jinghua allowed Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang to be so close. The two children grew up day by day and changed almost every day. Mu Yangling bought a lot of fabrics for them and asked the two girls who had nothing to do in the yard to make clothes for them. I did it, and I also made a lot of things that are practical or of high ornamental value. Qi Heiran didn't come back during the Chinese New Year, he just asked someone to send back a letter, and he didn't even have the New Year's goods. Although Qi Ziyuan was far away, he still brought 2 carts of New Year's goods, including the things that the Mu family and the Li family asked him to bring. According to the steward of the team, they walked this way for a month and a half, and it was very difficult. Not only were there bandits and mobs everywhere, but the road was covered with heavy snow. Even if the journey was safe, they would have to delay their arrival. Only then did Mu Yangling realize that the situation outside had deteriorated to this point. She hasn't been out of the house for half a year. After she came out of the palace, Mu Yangling consciously didn't go out because of the forbidden army outside. Because of the chaos in the outside world, the banquets of the upper-level officials were also reduced by half, and Li Jinghua didn't go out either. She was willing to cause trouble at this time, so she stayed in the mansion like Mu Yangling. As for what Mu Yangling wanted to buy, he made a list directly and asked the people below to buy it. Fan Zijin would pass in a sentence every half a month, but most of them would ask if there was anything he could do for him, and he would get no after answering, "Go do your own thing." Zhu Liang came every 3 days, one was to report on the things in the village, and the other was to give them some vegetables, fruits, poultry, and eggs from the village, so that they could try something new. Message and prepare their escape routes. But those news are all abstract, such as the chaos in Tongchuan Mansion. There are rebels, it is estimated that there are XX people, the imperial court's army is not strong enough, etc., but this leader is in charge all the way from north to south, almost walking in hell on earth, and because of this, I felt a lot, and it was even more shocking to talk about the specific situation with Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling was in a low mood. Sure enough, when he was happy, the people suffered, and when he died, the people suffered even more. Isn't the imperial court going to negotiate a peace? Why has there been no movement? Li Jinghua also felt very uncomfortable. Women don't like to hear such tragic situations. Mu Yangling knew more about this than Li Jinghua. He heard the words, Prime Minister Qin left Beijing earlier, but there has been no news of him coming back. I heard that the envoys of the Kingdom of Jin have sent back news that the Kingdom of Jin has agreed to negotiate peace, but Zixia has remained silent. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 531. The Emperor has successively mobilized 200,000 troops from General Yuan and Qi Ziyuan to resist the Zixia army. Although it is effective, due to the continuous rebellion in various places, the recovered cities often cannot be defended for 3 days. As soon as the front foot troops advance, there will be rebel troops behind them, captured the county town with few guards. And Zixia has been procrastinating and unwilling to negotiate a peace, but he did not completely refuse. Going on like this is completely in a dead end. Jinguo completely restrained Qi Ziyuan's troops. Even if De Zhou perished, could he give up the border and come back to fight for the throne? That is equivalent to opening the door and letting the golden soldiers go deep, and the crime must not be weaker than that of Li Zhenjai, who abandoned the pass and left. Mu Yangling lay on the bed and tossed and turned all night, and she still couldn't get a good idea after reading the book the next day. She had a headache and thought, if Jinguo is willing to take the initiative to withdraw troops and stop attacking Dezhou, it will be fine, but this only exists in dreams. She scribbled the triangular relationship between Dazhu, Zixia, and Jin on the paper. When she came to her senses, she saw that the paper was full of ink dots, so she crossed out the 3 countries on it with some disgust. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. The relationship between Dezhou and Zixia of Jin Kingdom is not good. Could it be that Jinguo and Zixia are just fine? You must know that they just had a fight a few years ago, and the defense map of the whole country of Jin was in their hands, but the upper echelons of the Jin country thought it was taken by Zixia. No, it was Zixia who took it, but Qi Heiran he accidentally taken it from Zixia's hand. Mu Yangling's fingertips trembled, and he began to make up his mind to write a letter to Qi Ziyuan. She felt that a stalemate in the situation would be of no benefit to them at all, and suggested that Qi Ziyuan could use beauty tricks and alienation tricks against Jinguo and Zixia. No worse than anyone else, at least he has been to a military academy for 4 years, and he doesn't need too many papers and analysis of ancient warfare every year. Regardless of the feasibility, Mu Yangling's brain is still very big. She doesn't know what cards Qi Ziyuan has to play, so she just speaks out all the ideas she can think of. Qi Ziyuan always has his own judgment and choice, and then the next day, I handed the secret letter to Zhu Liang and sent it. After handing over the letter, Mu Yangling was relieved for a while. After writing their son to Qi Heiran at night, she mentioned the war a little bit. She complained, if the war continues like this, I don't know if you can come back when my son starts enlightenment. It's a pity that you don't have enough troops, otherwise you can go around and attack Zixia, who is empty of troops, and it will relieve you a little bit. After Qi Heiran received the letter, he also touched Mu Yangling's little feet printed on the letter paper in a daze. He had seen his son twice, once when he returned to Beijing and once when he left Beijing. I know what this kid looks like. Qi Heiran sighed and was about to put the letter away before paying attention to the last sentence. Dezhou's troops were indeed restrained to death, unable to make a surprise attack, but it didn't mean they couldn't do it. Isn't there still a lot in the north? A Jin country bordering on a large area of Zixia? Qi Heiran wrote a secret letter to his elder brother. There were only 4 words, besiege Wei and save Zhao. He had no choice but to write more, but this time he wanted to create a letter. Right. The letter was quickly taken to the north by military pigeons. Qi Heiran waited patiently, counting the time when they received the letter. Just as Qi Ziyuan received Mu Yangling's secret letter, he received Qi Heiran's plain letter. He opened the letter and said with a smile, they really have a good understanding. Opening the letter and removing it, Mu Yangling wrote densely on the 2 pieces of paper. Qi Ziyuan resolutely put down the small note that looked at Qi Heiran first, and there were only 4 words, surround Wei and save Zhao on it. Qi Ziyuan frowned slightly, besiege Wei and save Zhao. Is there any country in this world that is willing to besiege Zixia and save me? Rongxian also frowned slightly, thinking deeply about the meaning of Qi Heiran's words. Because it was Ming's inn, they had to consider that Qi Heiran was acting for others to see. Qi Ziyuan picked up Mu Yangling's secret letter and read it. After reading it, there was a flash of light in his eyes. When he picked up Qi Heiran's note again, he smiled happily, it's a good idea. Qi Ziyuan handed Mu Yangling's letter to Rongxian, and said, Jinyu, What do you think we're trying to provoke the relationship between Jinguo and Zixia? Just as Aling said, whether it's a beauty trick or a divorce, let Jinguo come out and encircle Wei and save Zhao, otherwise our troops would have been bound at the border, unable to do anything. Qi Ziyuan's management in the kingdom of Jin and Zixia was not enough for him to do this, so he could only look for General Yuan, and after looking for General Yuan, he wanted to inform the emperor of the battle plan, but he was a little unsure if there was someone around the emperor at this time. Working carefully, after thinking about it, I still sent a secret letter, but didn't go into too much detail, but just mentioned a general idea, hoping that the emperor could give him support. Qi Ziyuan has only been in business for a few years, and there are very few people who can be used in the kingdom of Jin and Zixia. The key is that those people's status is not too high, and General Yuan has been in business for more than 20 years. A large base, but this is not comparable to the resources in the hands of the great Zhou dynasty. This is the gap between a power and a country. Fortunately, Emperor Jinjian was not so stupid that he was hopelessly stupid. Without knowing Qi Ziyuan's tendency to rebel, he immediately agreed after reading his proposal. It is possible to provoke a war between the Jin kingdom and the Zixia kingdom just by using some careful work and the resources in hand. Now that the great Zhou dynasty is about to perish, Emperor Jinjian will naturally not give up this breathing opportunity. But he also kept an eye out. He didn't hand over these people to Qi Ziyuan, he just sent him a person, and told him to do whatever he wanted, and he would do it himself. In order to prevent the people below from scrambling for power and delaying things, the emperor also specially brought them in and beat them up. The country is about to perish, and he hoped that they would temporarily give up those petty thoughts and focus on serving the country. But the emperor overestimated people's hearts and underestimated people's IQ. Qi Ziyuan's use of these people is equivalent to holding things with a 1-meter-long stick while blindfolded. Fortunately, Qi Ziyuan didn't leave too much hope to Emperor Jingyan at the beginning, and when he found out the other party's perfunctory after ordering several times, he decisively turned around and looked for General Yuan, and only gave him some insignificant and auxiliary tasks. The commander sent by the emperor originally wanted to force Qi Ziyuan to bow his head, but who would have thought that this would be the result, and he was immediately furious, but he couldn't find a reason to complain. And Qi Ziyuan approached General Yuan. Both of them wanted to end the situation around Jin Kingdom, and they were both military generals, so they were of the same mind on certain things, and General Yuan himself had a selfless radiance. Qi Ziyuan quickly got the attention of the upper echelon of Jin Kingdom arrived in Zixia, which is empty in the country. At the same time, a prince of Zixia got a secret. Jinguo and Dazhu made a secret agreement. Jinguo sent troops to help Dezhou repel Zixia, and Dezhou ceded the area north of the Yangtze River to Jinguo. It is said that this was a private agreement between the emperor of the great Zhou dynasty and the kingdom of Jin, and it was not made public. This news was sent back by someone who was placed next to the high-level officials of the kingdom of Jin by the prince of Zixia, and it must be correct. Considering the cowardice of the great Zhou emperor and his previous behavior of throwing land and giving away coins, the credibility of this matter is even higher. The prince of Zixia was furious, thinking that Jinguo had broken the contract and committed a heinous crime, so he entered the Zixia palace overnight. At this time, the upper echelons of the Jin kingdom had only set their sights on the Zixia's rear and sent people to inquire about their army's defenses in private, and they hadn't decided to take advantage of the fire to loot. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 532. The Zixia emperor was still a little skeptical, but when he sent people to investigate, he found that there were many spies from the kingdom of Jin on the border and capital of the two countries. Now it is difficult for him to believe it or not. He could only issue a secret order to call back part of the army to defend, but within a few days after the letter was sent, the kingdom of Jin launched an offensive, and a small-scale war broke out between the two countries. The Prince of Zixia suggested, "Your Majesty, the kingdom of Jin has only been investigating for a short period of time, so we must not have confirmed our strength. This time, we must send troops to test our strength. If we retreat at this time, I am afraid that they will think that our strength is insufficient, and we will not wait until then. If our army comes back and launches an attack, then our country will be lost. What do you think the emperor should do? Gather troops and give them a hard blow. Let them understand that even if we Xixia send troops to the great Zhou dynasty, it is not something Jingguo can bully. Due to the previous crown prince dispute and domestic rebellion, the national strength of the Jin kingdom has been reduced a lot, while Xixia has become stronger because of the reform. Although it cannot crush the Jin kingdom and the great Zhou dynasty, its overall military strength and national strength are stronger than the two countries. But they have to bring Jingguo together to deal with the weak Zhou, so how can they deal with the combat power of two countries at once? Both the Xixia emperor and the Xixia prince understand this, so they can only hope to deter the Jin kingdom first, and wait for their army to return to defense. Although the offensive against the great Zhou will weaken, it is still more important to keep the mainland. The army of the kingdom of Jin who attacked them before had disappeared, and they did not know where to hide, but the Xixia emperor's target was not them. Since they wanted to teach the kingdom of Jin an unforgettable lesson, they naturally would not choose an army outside. He directly set his target on a city in the kingdom of Jin not far from the border between the two countries. He asked the prince of Xixia to lead the troops himself, and dispatched troops from the border to concentrate on attacking the city, so that the kingdom of Jin would know that their troops on the border are not weak now. Of course, he did not forget to ask the dispatched troops to plant more flags, in order to make the illusion that the strength of the troops has not decreased. The upper echelons of the kingdom of Jin, who were still considering whether to attack Xixia, also learned the news through the eyeliner placed in Xixia that Xixia was going to attack the kingdom of Jin, and was ambitious to jointly win the kingdom of Jin and Dazhu with Tubo. The upper echelons of the Jin kingdom laughed hee, and didn't believe it. Xixia wasn't crazy. How could it be possible to face Dezhou and their Jin kingdom at the same time? But soon, news came from the border that the prince of Xixia led people to attack their city, and the spies reported that the number of Xixia soldiers in other places was increasing day by day. Just looking at the smoke they cook every day and the flags planted in the barracks, they are adding troops every day. The upper echelons of the kingdom of Jin trembled in their hearts, and then asked hesitantly, I remember that there seems to be a Tubo princess in the western Xia harem. Yes, my lord, the most favored concubine of the Xixia emperor is the third princess of Tubo. The complexion of the upper echelons of the Jin kingdom changed, and they hurriedly contacted Wuli, the emperor of the Jin kingdom, who was having a headache for several restless brothers. Hearing this, he sneered, Xixia is too arrogant, thinking that with the alliance of Tubo, they can take me down. The kingdom of Jin? Make Pija think, let him retreat from the border of the great Zhou, and teach Xixia a lesson. The territory of our kingdom of Jin has not expanded for a long time. Anyway, the border of the great Zhou was strictly guarded by those surnamed Yuan and those surnamed Qi. Something to do. The Xixia general who just wanted to plant more flags to intimidate Jingguo did not expect to be self-defeating. And the prince of Xixia, who was satisfied with conquering a city in the kingdom of Jin, was also satisfied. Shouldn't the kingdom of Jin hesitate to retreat now? The kingdom of Jin was indeed quiet for 2 days, but it was unexpected that on the third day, the war between the kingdom of Jin and Xixia broke out in an all-round way. All the villages on the border of Xixia were attacked by the kingdom of Jin. Because of the lack of troops, the kingdom of Jin quickly attacked go down some towns and enter Xixia. This is completely different from what the intelligence said. There are not many Xixia soldiers in the town. The generals of the kingdom of Jin who invaded the city were both happy and surprised. It is not only the Han people who pretend to be the leader. They respect martial arts and have seen it for 200 years. The Jin state also likes to do such things very much, so there is not much discrepancy between the military achievements and intelligence reported by the generals of the Jin state. The upper echelons of the kingdom of Jin and Emperor Wuli, who stayed behind, only thought that their warriors were suffocating at the border of the Great Zhou, and that's why they were so brave. The brave soldiers of the kingdom of Jin conquered the city in Xixia. The Emperor of Xixia won 3 gold medals one after another and urgently recalled all the troops who had penetrated into the Great Zhou. Although the Great Zhou was rich and beautiful, they were more accustomed to life on the grasslands and loved their hometown even more. So they can't give up their hometown. It seems that the information is not wrong. Jinguo is a treacherous villain. He obviously made an appointment with them to attack Dezhou, but in the end he partnered with Dezhou to bully Xixia. The Emperor Xixia now even suspects that this was a trap from the beginning, otherwise why would the kingdom of Jin not be able to advance even an inch while fighting at the border? You must know that in the past, Jinguo's fight against the Great Zhou was like teasing a cat, and it was easy to conquer territory. Wu Lai originally only planned to let the warriors open up on the border, just move the border a little further, because he had to beware of Dezhou's soldiers and horses. But he didn't expect Xixia to be so easy to fight, and when their war with Xixia lasted for almost a month, Dezhou's army was also mobilized, and they were transferred back to the south of the Yangtze River to suppress the rebel army. Wu Lai struggled for a while, and finally decided to give up Dezhou first, and beat 11 Xia honestly first. Dezhou has long lost his fighting spirit. Except for Yuan Qi, who is more difficult to deal with, everyone else is easy to talk about, but Xixia is different. He is now a fierce tiger that is awakening. Now they dare to attack Jinguo. The country is about to have one more powerful enemy, and he doesn't want to see such a situation. Dazhu is a Han people, and Han people are timid, and they are honest when they are frightened, but Xixia is a nomadic people like their Jin kingdom. They are martial, brave, and ambitious. Such an enemy should press down when the opponent is not yet grown up, lest you become a strong enemy. Qi Ziyuan and General Yuan, who had been secretly paying attention to this point, breathed a sigh of relief as the Jin kingdom's battle line moved towards the interior of Xixia. General Yuan's hair was gray, and he looked at Qi Ziyuan in relief and said, "It's true that the waves behind the Yangtze River push forward the waves ahead. Not bad, not bad." The general praised you. Without your connections, Ziyuan would not be able to do such a thing even if he wanted to. But I have such a network in hand, and I can't calculate such an effect. It can be seen that the most important thing is your talent. General Yuan looked at the map, smiled slightly, and sighed. The crisis of the Jin kingdom, it has been eliminated. Now it is time to clean up the remaining troops of Xixia in Dazhu and those rebels.